have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie here, and I think it's so fitting that we've had these 5 writers who have been here on stage sharing with us their stories. We know the danger of a single story, and these guys are here coming. They were a warm-up. They were the opening act for you today. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. What we want to do, what we're going to do, if you please, we're just going to ask you to finish, and everyone's going to have literally 1 minute to finish your stories. Yeah?
she is clearly the icon of icons too. Is it it? We hope to develop a range of vocabularies and imaginative registers to continue to hold each other accountable, to converse, to discover, to realize meeting places, to disagree strongly, differ rigorously without destroying each other, to think about difficulty and difference respectfully, to be the best possible versions of ourselves as free beings. Thank you for choosing Abantu and welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so sorry that my voice isn't good today, but I'm so happy to be here. I can't tell you. I'm so happy to be here. And this obviously was a clear choice that I made, and the right choice. And I maybe at some point we can talk about some of the letters that my agent got after it was announced that I was coming here. We want to know why she's attending a racist and it's a festival that excludes people. And I'm thinking, actually, I'm attending a festival that includes people. Mm-hmm. And when I read Tando's lovely message, where is he? I was just like, I love him. But I was like, you know what? A festival for black people. I'm a black person. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah.
Thank you, Chimamanda. We are very happy you are here too. So we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation. I want to talk about some of your work. I want to talk about some of your writing. I want to talk about, some of the work that you do, that your work does in the world. But I'm going to start because I have been tagged to death on social media to ask you a certain question that I think that my sense is that many of your readers across the world are obsessed with different characters from your novels. There's South African readers who have a particular obsession with a specific character. So I have been sent no fewer than 100 requests to ask you a specific question about a character. Tando says, oh, she knows she gets asked this all the time. I hope not. I hope people elsewhere are obsessed with different characters. So your character, Kainene, invites particular responses in South African readers, and especially your South African women readers and feminist readers more broadly. And I have been asked, so let me just read the question, then I'll ask you the question that I want to ask about Kaine. So I've been asked, where did she go? And I say, but she's a character, she didn't go anywhere. She's not a person. They go, we don't want your answer. Where did she go? Why did Adichie have to disappear her? Does she haunt her like she haunts us? Does she walk around the world with Kainene popping up constantly saying, Chimamanda, you don't get rid of me that easily? What does this mean to you as a writer and as a reader? This capacity of your characters to follow your readers around, to take on a life of their own. Readers who clearly read quite widely, who know that a character is not real, but nonetheless fall so in love with a character that they will not let go of her, and are in fact lovingly and playfully, but quite seriously willing to fight you over her.
The answer to the question, I don't know. Sorry. But I'm happy actually to hear that Kainene. When Kainene came to me, and sometimes characters, I really feel like it's not entirely conscious, the process of creating them. There's a sense in which Kainene, obviously I wrote her and I made her, but she kind of also made herself. And I loved her. So of the twin sisters, she was my girl. Olanna was very much the good woman. And I thought actually that Olanna would be the person people would love, right? Because she's good. And she ticks all the boxes a woman should tick. And Kainene is like, I'm going to live life on my own damn terms. But when I was writing it, I kind of knew something bad would happen to a character. I wasn't sure which character it was. But I had also done so much research about people who had disappeared. And I found it very haunting because even today, so the last story I heard was about 2010, but fairly recent, that people were still hoping that their family members who did not come back in 1970 will somehow reappear. There's a woman who's from a hometown next to mine, and they tell her, oh, we saw somebody who looks like him in Benin, and she'll get up and go to Benin. Oh, we saw somebody who looks like him near Oka, she'll get up and go. Because she's still hoping. And I find it so haunting. Like, you don't have closure. I think when you lose somebody, this person is dead, and then you start the grieving. But it's a kind of grieving where you're still making room for hope. And I can't imagine what it's like. So I hoped that the readers would have that kind of feeling, where you just will never have closure. I didn't have closure. And I'm kind of still, I don't know where she is, and I'm kind of still looking. So please don't beat me, because I am hurting like you are.
So you've had your answer. Now you can stop tagging me and start tagging Chimamanda about.
But thankfully I'm not on social media.
You can start. And of course, in your response to where she went, and the haunting and the inability to complete that grieving, you are also speaking in many ways about the context under which she disappears and the context under which so many people disappear, and the Biafran War, which is, in one sense, distant. It happened a long time ago. But in another sense, and I think perhaps in many more senses, a very present reality, a very present history and a very present past. And I'm struck by how you write about it. And I'm struck also by how difficult it seems to be to write about the Biafran War. So it is present, it is everywhere, it is part of this festering wound of this delicacy. It's a delicate wound, it's a kind of delicate skin that hasn't quite healed and cannot heal. But one that is also difficult to talk about. And I think and I'm struck by the way you write about something that is so big, in a way that I think obviously some of the best literature does, in a way that doesn't just, as some of your critics have said, humanize it, but also allows us to think about what it means differently, what it was about differently, focalizing it as you do through characters that live through it, that live very mundane but spectacular experiences at the same time. And I was struck when I watched a different creative text in a theater that taught South African theaters last year, Kakadu, the musical, that writing about the Biafran War is still, that is a kind of a cousin project. It's a very different kind of project from yours creatively. But that nonetheless, I couldn't help thinking that it was a kind of a cousin project. And I'm not asking you to speak about Kakadu. No, I'm not asking you to speak about Kakadu. I couldn't help think of it as a cousin in a different way. Why do you think it's so hard and yet so necessary to sit with that chapter imaginatively again and still?
I think because there's still many stories from that period that haven't been told, but also because it's such a central part of Nigerian history. And it's still very much contested. And because of that, I think it's important, because of its contested nature, for many stories to come from it. I don't think it's possible to understand Nigeria today without understanding the Nigeria-Biafran War. It's impossible. There's so much that you can trace back to that period. And because we haven't really talked about it, because we don't learn about it in school, because we carry with us sort of set ideas that, there are people who just think Biafra was about a crazy man who wanted to divide Nigeria. Right? And so in some ways there's an ignorance, there's a collective ignorance. And because of that, I think it's necessary that we tell many stories. Right? I hoped that novel would start a conversation, and I think it did. And I've been gratified to see that more people are telling stories that are set in that period. More people are asking their parents. Right? The people who have said to me, my God, my parents lived through this and I never knew. Right? Because so many people just closed their memories. And so it makes me happy to hear that somebody's writing about that period from whatever point of view, the more stories we have about that period, I think the better. And the more likely we are to understand where we are. I mean, history is so important to me. I think, and I think that collectively, not just Nigeria, I think as a continent, we do not engage enough with our history. And not necessarily sort of, the Europeans came, but our own history. What did we do before they came, What I find it increasingly fascinating, and I find myself sort of wanting to go back and it's funny to kind of craft for myself a validation of who I am based on pre-colonial history.
Staying with history but changing tack slightly. So when I've taught different texts by you. When I've taught Purple Hibiscus, the favorite, which is also my favorite, is Auntie Gioma. And Ifioma, what did I say? I'm sorry.
Ijeoma is another Nigerian. I'm very impressed. You know Tsune.
Auntie Ifioma is a character much beloved of me and many of my students over the years in undergrad and postgrad literature courses. And I often like to think about her as both a past and a future Gambili. And I think that, so I'm just going to pose a thought to you and see what you do with it, what you want. You can say, no, absolutely. And I think that part of what you're doing there, as you're doing in several other places, is also writing a feminist intellectual past as difficult, but also available. Because I think very often those of us who are African feminists, we have to constantly deal with the accusation of newness.
Yes, yes. So well put, the accusation of newness. Yes, yes.
And so it seems to me, and this question and this thought strikes me also in terms of how your love affair across various of your texts with Nsuka, the university town that is beloved of you, but that I feel often like you're writing a constant love letter to in across various kinds of texts that you write. What are your thoughts?
You're right. No, but you didn't finish. So you were saying something about Antifoma as a kind of past and future Kambili. Tell me.
Yes, because I think that Kambili is clearly very kind of uncomfortable in this home, right? And we have character, in the African feminist literary tradition, we have various children who are uncomfortable and asking the wrong kinds of questions, bad girls, the wrong kinds of girls, right? The kind of favorites of feminist readers and feminist writers. But very often, we have to think about them as creating a certain future, which is the work that is necessary. What is fascinating to me is that your work seems very much part of that tradition, but it also seems so committed to creating that future at the same time as saying, but it's not an inaugurated future, it is a future that already exists. And so you have these fabulous, troublesome, beautiful, feminist, well, I'm saying they're feminist, women characters pop up who are professors and just badly behaved in the best possible ways.
And they are feminists, and we should be able to say that. You know, I find it interesting how, I mean, it's interesting what you said about this accusation of newness, that there's a part of us that has to hold on to a certain kind of defensiveness, even to claim the label feminist. I mean, I think about all the, how I went from, they'll say, oh, a feminist is a person who is angry that she does not have a husband. And I said, okay, I'm a happy feminist, right? Then they say a feminist is a person who's not an African because, you know, you read books by white people. I'm like, all right, I'm an African feminist. You know, and they're like, oh, but you like makeup. A feminist cannot like makeup. I'm like, all right, I'm a feminist who likes lip gloss. And at some point, right, so I had all of these qualifications. And at some point, I thought, you know what, no, I don't need to qualify it, right? And because I think part of the problem is this idea that feminist is still so contested and still so, that we're like, should we say, shouldn't we? Those characters are feminists just because, for me, they want to define the scope of their own lives, the meaning of their own lives. You know, they think that they dare to, they should.
Absolutely.
And so they are. And Antifoma, I think it's obvious in the book that the author has a certain sort of affection for some characters. And Antifoma, I think, I think I created from a sense of longing because she's the auntie and maybe the mother that I wanted to have. I mean, I adore my mother. My mother is lovely. But, and my mother in many ways was very progressive for her time and place. I mean, there are things we disagree about, particularly about the sort of how important marriage should be to a woman, that kind of thing. But Antifoma for me came from a longing of just a woman who just refuses, you know, but who still is humane and deeply kind and loving. Because I think often, I often say to young Nigerian feminists, I say to them, please do not use feminism to justify your wickedness, right? Because sometimes a woman, right? So you have some of these young women, I'm talking to them, and they sound really mean. And I say, you know what? This isn't feminism. You're just really nasty. and I know that there are people, what?
What?
Abomination. Okay, I didn't hear that.
Go ahead.
Anyway, I know that there are people, for example, for whom, you know, people I meet for whom sort of my kindness comes as a surprise because I'm a feminist. Therefore, oh, you're kind. And I think, yes, because actually feminists are, you know, we're human. And so for me, Antifoma she's fierce, she's a truth teller, she will tell you off if you need to be told off, right? But she's kind and thoughtful, and she thinks she matters equally.
Absolutely.
And for that, I adored writing her. And I think I think it's a valid reading. And actually, I think it's true that I'm very much interested in how our presence as people from this continent, shaped by this continent, we constantly have to link to our past. And I think it's why I'm fascinated by pre-colonial history increasingly, right? Because there's so much there that's unexplored. And for me, I want to craft a feminism that is firmly rooted there, which is why I constantly talk about my great-grandmother. When people tell me, oh, so, you know, which school of feminism? Is it Simone de Beauvoir or something? And half the time I don't even know what they're talking about because I haven't read the books. But for me, I'm thinking, actually, had Western feminism not been the most sort of documented feminism, we would be having more conversations,
Absolutely.
right? It wouldn't be, are you first wave or second wave? It might, in fact, be, are you, you know, pre-colonial and, you know, whatever, I don't know, Songhai Empire, right? And I kind of want those conversations to start to happen. So my feminism is rooted in my great-grandmother, who was called a troublemaker, who was called Headstrong, who people still talk about talk about her in my hometown. And sometimes I'll say something, and my father will shake his head and say, "Your hair come back." Right? And so I take my sense of validation from that.
And I think that's very, very important. I really appreciate that. I mean, I think that it is important to continue to make that change because precisely because I think that this notion that the best way, the most convincing, the most historically accurate, even though it isn't, when you speak about feminism in the world, the feminist consciousness in the world across time has to be through waves. I know often when I say the first time I called myself a feminist, I was 15 and I hadn't read. I hadn't read, but I knew, as many feminists in the world know, from living, that something isn't quite right, from not having properly the desire to be boxed, from being too much and too little and too loud and too smart and too messy and not really quite learning properly how to not want to be that. And so I really appreciate the insistence, I think, in refusing that lie that it's new. And also in refusing that lie that, you have to speak about, even if you say what kind of feminist, that the kind has to be only from one of 3 or one of 20 categories. And of course you get, I don't know if it's an accusation or if it's an accolade, that you make feminism accessible. Right?
I think it's both. Depends on who's saying it.
You make it accessible and relatable. And I think yes, of course, but also without making it easy and flippant. And I think that we're at a very interesting time for feminism in the world today, because it seems to me to both continue to do radical, transformative, joyful work, and also, and I'm going to get into trouble here, and also and also do some work that I'm not always. Sometimes I find myself sitting and thinking, okay, but why is that feminist? Right? It can exist in the world, but is it necessary for everything in the world to be described as feminist? Because surely if it is, then we wouldn't need we would have won, right? And so...
Like what? Give me an example.
Like sometimes the way in which choice is used, right? So choice is a very important part of feminist thinking and life and all sorts of things. But of course, you can make choices that are responsible and choices that are irresponsible, right? And so the fact that it's a choice on its own doesn't seem to me to automatically make the mere exercise of choice, so the exercise might be feminist, but it doesn't automatically make the choice itself feminist. Right. And so often I think that there's a blurring of that. I made a choice, you're a feminist. How can you then say that my choice, and sometimes even choosing things that are very boringly and obviously patriarchal as a feminist choice. So I wonder sometimes about, I think it's wonderful that it's relatable and that you're a very important part of making people claim their feminism, right? And not, I think we're living in an exciting time where more and more people are claiming to be feminists. I remember, I'm 46, I just turned 46, and I remember it wasn't so fashionable. I remember it not being so fashionable even 20 years ago that people would do feminist things. They'd be like, my feminist with a small f, I'm a feminist, but I'm not quite a feminist, I have feminist sympathies. And now, I walk around and I see people who are the age I was then in South Africa and in the world claiming feminism, and nothing makes me happier. So I don't want to police, but I do have worries about the work that feminism does in the world and what your thoughts are. Some of the work that the word feminist also does in the world. It could just be my
I think too, I'm
obsession.
happy to hear, so people hear, so feminist is no longer, well, you need to come to Nigeria. Because it's still a big problem.
I come to Nigeria often.
Okay, because this whole thing about people claiming to be a feminist in a space like Nigeria is constantly to be in battle. Because people assume, they make all kinds of assumptions. So I talk to young women who, many are just weary from battle constantly. And so I find myself very, I'm very keen to sort of challenge this idea that somehow feminism is now so cool that we're all adopting it, and even the idea of adopting it has no consequences, because I don't think that's true. Even in Western spaces, right? Even in political spaces, which is why women running for office all over the world still find that word to be something they have to shy away from, right? The German prime minister says, I'm not a feminist. Hillary Clinton, when she was running, constantly had to tie herself in knots about it. There's a woman who was running for office in Nigeria recently who I guess nobody knew about, but then she needed to be known. So what does she do? She says, Chimamanda is an extremist. Feminism is bad. So she gets in the news. But I think she's tapping into something, which is a certain kind of, like a distrust, like a reflexive hostility towards the idea. So I do know that there's some young people who are questioning. And so, for example, when I said yes to Beyonce using the words in her thing, because I thought there are young people who are going to even hear that word and hopefully start to claim it. And maybe it's because my approach has never been, I like to say, for this I've gotten some angry emails, I don't much care about feminist theory. It doesn't interest me. I care about sort of the textured lives. And I think it's partly because I'm a storyteller. So I come from sort of the perspective of storytelling. So that when there's a theory, I'm thinking, how can we turn that into a story, and does it work? And how then does turning it into a story make it complicated? And in fact, prove it to be false, right? Or not. And because of that, for me, if more people are identifying as feminists, obviously there are going to be problems. There are people who, there's a woman who said to me, she doesn't support choice, reproductive choice, and she thinks it's a feminist position to take because she made that decision and it's her choice not to support choice. Now, I said to her, no, it's not a feminist position, because what you're doing is that you're depriving women. So if you're voting for this, we can actually have a conversation, logical conversation about why it's not feminist, right? So I think that when you say policing, there's room for that, right? There's room to say, well, here's where, choices, what we call choices are not always choices. It's also kind of similar to the ways in which women continue to be defined solely in domestic terms. And then we say, oh, it's a choice. And I'm thinking, actually, but we need to talk about it in a calm way, which is to say, how is it a choice if we don't have other equal alternatives there, right? Then it's not a choice. And because feminism, so I'm very open to those conversations that some people might call policing, right? I think maybe what I find myself sometimes, and you said you're not sure if it's an accolade or an accusation. I think it's both. So there are people who've said to me, oh, you've made it so, accessible and it's everywhere. And I'm thinking, yeah. Right. And I do believe in feminisms, which is to say that I think that academic feminism has its role. I think that my sort of, I guess maybe we would call it a more populist, sort of story-centered feminism has its place. My thing is, I'm the sort of person, I meet a woman at the airport and she's like, oh, I really want to say I'm a feminist, but, my husband will get angry. And my thing is, can I talk to him? Give me the phone. Because I'm just thinking, can we get this going? Like, how can we make change happen today? Change is always incremental, so of course it's going to be small. But what warms my heart is just to hear little things. So recently in Lagos, a man said to me, I read J.J. Awele, and I think I'm a different father because of it. And it just made my day, Because my thing is, how do we, those little things, how do we get, some men who just don't get it? Because, and it's also why I talk about men, that men have to be part of it. I just feel really strongly about that. And increasingly, I want to talk more about boys. Because, it really bothers me that we constantly tell girls and women. Again, I was just in Lagos, and a woman was raped. And her friend said to her, why did you not wear tight jeans? And these are all sort of well-educated. Yes, because apparently they said to her, if you wore tight jeans, then it would be harder for them to pull it off and rape you. And I just remember sitting there thinking, No, no, no. We should be asking those men. So I kind of feel that feminism really has to. I mean, I know that there are women who feel that they're so tired of wiping the butts of male-identified people in the world, you know. Like, we're so tired of making that our responsibility, and I hear that. But in some ways, I feel that raising boys differently, and by differently, I don't mean, you know, let's teach them to respect women and hold the door for them. No, let's teach them that girls and women are just as human as they are. We don't do that enough, and I just feel like if we want to change things, then we have to. Nobody's going to do it. Men are not going to do it. I mean, they've never really done anything.
What happened? What did you... Okay, so I have 500 more questions, but I'm going to ask you 1.5, and then we're going to open it to the audience. So, so our keynote to Abantu, Dr. Bibi Bakara Yusuf yesterday was talking about, in her keynote, she was talking about some of the expectation that comes with visibility, with success and visibility, at a time where too few people, especially in literature, too few there are too few people that are visible. So the expectation often, when you have a certain politics, is that you will do all of the difficult work. That, and this is not an apology for being called to do difficult work, right? But I want to talk a little bit about that difficulty, right? About the responsibility of what your work and your words and your statements and your truth and your public utterances, all of that kind of work creates in the world, and the expectation. And so you're talking about, you know, you value feminisms, right? As I think many of us do. But could you tell us something about your experience of navigating, because you've also, and I'll just very quickly say 2 or 3, several positions that you've taken or not taken that have been incredibly, I don't really like this word, but I'm going to use it, controversial, right? And I don't like the word.
Like what?
I'm going to tell you. Like your position on trans women, like your position on Hillary Clinton, like I know you've seen the accusations that you were too chummy with Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama and didn't hold them accountable enough. So a range of things. I was going to ask them individually, but now since I've been given the time, I'm kind of squashing things that I actually would have. So you know, so I guess something about, you know, difference, disagreement, and how they intersect with visibility and the expectations of being Chimamanda.
I think maybe the first thing is I don't, until things get really noisy and heated up, I don't know about them. Okay. So that's one, that's sort of, I'm not on social media, I never search for myself, I don't read things about myself. And in some ways so I'm actually hearing this for the first time, that I was accused of being too charming with Michelle Obama and Hillary. Well, yes, thank you. I own that very happily. There are women I admire in the world, and yesterday I talked about this, something that troubles me, which is this increasing expectation of perfection, particularly from people who are in public spaces, where you're no longer allowed to be human, and where, you know, where you're cancelled if there's the smallest flaw that's been discovered. You're not allowed to evolve, you're not, and I find that deeply troubling. And so this idea, for example, Hillary Clinton I have admired for a long time, since I was a little girl. I've read everything she's written. Is she a person who is flawed? Yes, we all are. Are there positions of hers that I have disagreed with? Yes. But do I sort of, as a whole, admire her deeply? Yes. And I always will, right? And I just refuse to apologize for that. And my conversation with her, I mean, the people who've said, you know, her husband did this and that, why didn't you ask her? No, I'm not interested in asking her to take responsibility for what a man did. And I wanted to know, I wanted to know what she's like as a person. I'm a storyteller, and there's a particular point of view that I will always have when I approach people. And with Michelle Obama, I adore Michelle Obama. She's my sister. And so somehow that I'm not even sure. I'm sure maybe I should have asked her about Syria and the drones. No, Michelle didn't do that. So I'm not going to ask her about that, you know. And I'm there to talk about her book. And you know, this being charming as an accusation, I find hilarious. I was born charming. So, you know, but... And maybe this is also why I don't read things, because I get irritated by things, you know. The trans noise, I mean, I took more seriously, because first I felt very defensive, because I felt that I had been terribly misunderstood. I thought, I actually then started feeling kind of sympathy for white people when you accuse them of racism, and they say, but I'm on your side. Because actually, my first thought was, but I'm on your side, right? What I later, in thinking about it, and I think that there's some people who were genuinely hurt because they genuinely read something into what I said, and I felt bad about that. I do think that there are many people who took it as an opportunity to there are people I think who enjoy the idea of if your head is too high up, they want to cut it down. Mm-hmm. And I know that comes with the territory. It's not just about me, it's about anybody whose head is up, right? People just sort of like that. But my position remains the same, which is the point I was making is, we can't, I think that in liberal discourse, there's this need to somehow insist that difference means value, right? That for us to acknowledge difference means that we're saying that one is better than the other. And it bothers me because I just feel like then we can't really talk about the texture of different experiences, which is what I'm interested in. I think that, and for me, the fundamental idea of feminism as I believe it, is that the body matters, right? That female-bodied people have experienced particular things that have shaped their, oppression is a large word, but really have shaped their oppression. And for somebody to then say to me that a person who is not female-bodied, who feels a particular way and lives in the world as a person who's not female-bodied, has the same experience as somebody who is female-bodied, just isn't true. And I think that to acknowledge that doesn't mean that we're somehow saying that one experience is worse or somehow more valued. And the reason I said that, there was a context to the question. It was sort of this, and I think it was sort of anti-feminist. It was sort of a kind of, well, if you people are saying that feminism is this, then what do you say about that? So there was something about it that, for me, was important to say, feminism is a large window, a large sort of tent. There are differences. It doesn't make it any less feminist, because I was kind of surprised that people took it to mean I was saying that somehow trans women are not part of feminism, which, doesn't make sense to me, because if anything, actually, I think that trans women make the feminist argument maybe the best, because it's sort of this challenge that we cannot be limited by the bodies that we're born with, right? We are. That's the reality of the world. But what feminism is saying is that we shouldn't be, right? And so, and really, fundamentally for me, it was also kind of a rejection of a certain kind of liberal orthodoxy that I increasingly find problematic. There is a language you're supposed to use, right? The words that people are looking to see, and if they don't see it, you're immediately castigated. And for me, what that became, I went through sort of feeling defensive, feeling sad, feeling like my own tribe had let me down. But then, in the end, kind of feeling almost liberated. Because what it then made clear is that I don't do orthodoxy. And I shouldn't be expected to do orthodoxy. And there's certain words that people think I should use that I don't have to use, right? And the insistence on it, and the kind of that as a reason then for you to be cancelled or whatever, there are consequences to actions, and there's certain ones that I'm willing to live with.
Thank you, Chimamanda. So, 15 minutes. So can we take one round of questions? Can I please ask that before I take questions, just to announce which I was supposed to do at the beginning, but I was so distracted by the electricity playing games with us, that this session is being live broadcast on Kaya TV, right? So don't hold us responsible so whatever you're going to ask, you are responsible for. You can't say you didn't know. So I see a few hands going down now. Okay, that's fine. Kaya TV it's being live streamed across. I was just notified just before that it's being live streamed. So there's people who couldn't fit into this venue. So I'm just saying, if people want to say something that they only want people in this room to hear, then they should know this and be able to make that choice. The second thing is that Chimamanda will sign books after, but, she will not take selfies because she does have to go, and selfies take a long time. So you can take a picture of her signing your book, but you can't ask her for a selfie. So please don't ask. Consent is important for feminists.
Well, no,
Okay.
I want to say I would have been actually very happy to take selfies. However, I have a flight to catch.
So-
I haven't seen my baby girl in 4 days, and I cannot miss my flight.
So, and can we please keep the questions short? In the gray, yes. Sorry, just a moment.
For that. I just want to ask, you mentioned, I think earlier or last night or somewhere, that you were not keen on coming to South Africa. Can you just give us context on why? And I've also heard the rumors, kind of the literary space. And will you tell us if you'll come again? Because we really would like to have you.
I'll come again, for sure.
Hello, my name is Nolwazi. I want to know, as a writer, in the books that you write, are there parts of your own reality in them, specifically in Americana?
Which maybe is sort of saying, is there an Obinze and where is he? And the answer is no. Sadly, there is no Obinze. No, Americana, I don't really write about myself because it doesn't really interest me, not in fiction. Americana, I use bits of my experiences. So the way that Ifemelu becomes black when she goes to the US, that was kind of my experience because in Nigeria, I just hadn't thought of myself as black. The way that she, at some point, decides to stop doing an American accent was kind of me as well because one day I just woke up and I said, I'm so tired of saying, like it took so much energy. Can I have some water, please? I was just like, it takes, and I thought I'm going to take that energy and put it into other things. So I started talking like I talk, which was just easier. So I kind of put that in the book. So that there are little bits of that, right, that in the book, but on the whole, not really. It's not really my story. Her story is more exciting. She's more exciting. But fiction, I think, is often about writers writing about what they wish they were, not what they are. Yeah, it's true.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, wait, I didn't answer your question. Will I come back? Yes, I'll come back.
Abantu?
Why? Yes, I'll come. I'll come back to Abantu. I will. Why did it? Well, I talked about it yesterday. There are two things. It was sort of me just not getting South Africa. I'd read so much about it, and the history sat heavily for me. Right. So apartheid was very important. Sort of when I was growing up, it was a thing in Nigeria. My parents and their academic friends talked about, the terrible governments who would not, punish South Africa, that kind of thing. And Mandela, of course, was this icon. And then I came here, and, and people were telling me, oh, it's now a rainbow nation. And I couldn't, do you know? I mean, I just felt, and I started thinking, is it maybe the Nigerian in me? Because, I think we have there's a sense in which the experiences are quite different. So you go to Nigeria, Nigerians don't really get race because we just haven't had that. And so I thought, am I so puzzled by this? Because I'm thinking, all of these things happen, and it's quite recent. And now all of a sudden it's a rainbow, and everybody was like, it's a rainbow nation. And I don't mean it was South Africans of all races. Black South Africans told me that. White South Africans told me that. Indian South Africans told me that. And I was just like, okay. And I was puzzled by it. And then we went to Robben Island, and there was a man who was in a Jeep, and he sort of almost drove towards people and shouted something in Afrikaans. And the guide said to us, oh, he used to be a prison guard, and he's angry at the new South Africa. And I just thought, honestly, so I mean, the Nigerian in me again thought, what kind of rubbish is that? And he's driving the Jeep, and he's right. So all of those things were I just found it strange. And then I went to Cape Town, and again, I have to remind you that I'm not.
Oh, child.
I'm Nigerian. I've been to Ghana, Kenya. There's an African infrastructure that's familiar in all of these places. And I got to Cape Town, I was confused. And then I went for a literary thing in which an Englishman, older man, very misogynistic, very condescending, very unpleasant experience for me in Cape Town. The whole thing just sort of melded into, and then of course I had trouble getting a visa because the South African embassy in Lagos seems to have just been constituted to humiliate Nigerians. And so all of those things came together for me, and I was like, I'm not for now. Maybe another time. But coming this time, I have to say it was different. First of all, for me, so I get excited about silly things. So I was so hyped. I thought it was the coolest thing that the guy who drove me from the airport speaks 8 African languages. I was like, yes. And so he's talking to different people. And I just find that, as a person whose sort of instincts are Pan-African, really wonderful. Because for me, and I didn't notice that when I came the last time, when everybody was telling me, Rainbow Nation. What I felt this time was just this sense that I got the sense that Black South Africans are kind of owning who they are. It felt to me that the languages, so he switched from so many. He stopped to talk to a guard, he was speaking something else, he's on the phone speaking something else, we stopped somewhere, he's speaking something else, and they're all African languages, and they're all, I just thought, oh, I love it. So it's different. Also, it's different that, maybe what I think my last time was shaped by what I came for. So I was brought by sort of a British literary thing, and it was manned by this man who was telling us what to do, and a man who, because there's still a part of me that's very much a well-brought-up Igbo girl who shows respect for her elders. So we're all sitting down. He appears. There's no seat for him. So I get up and I say, would you like me to stand? I'll stand up for you. And he goes, I'd rather like you to lie down for me. And there are people there, and somehow this is okay, right? But anyway, so all of those things formed my first experience. But it's different now. I am so coming back. But the thing is, when I come back, I know the spaces in which I will go, right? Yeah.
Kwezi.
Oh, I'll be quick. Again, thank you, both of you, very much for your work and your words and your cleverness. So I wanted to take you back to the conversation around feminism and its kind of accessibility, palatability, right? And just, I needed to reflect on a nervousness of mine, which is about saying, I'm really excited at a widening discourse, right? We want to change people's minds, and it looks like we are. But there seems to be some shrinking space so feminism for me always felt like the safe haven for like the short, ugly, fat, queer black girls who aren't really the kind of phenotypically beautiful aesthetic. We found a home in this place that says your body matters and all of its variation and now with our broad church, which I must say again I'm excited about, it does seem like the space for these ugly short queer girls is shrinking on the other side, because now the qualification seems to say you can be a feminist and really pretty, and actually those are the feminists we want to see on TV because they are the ones who have to sell it properly. So now, where's our home going to?
Hi.
Do you know, I hear you, and I agree. I mean, I do think that there is, that I agree that I can sense that idea that it's not so much that the space is shrinking for women who are not, and I, and I almost feel like I now have to go and tell my mother, why did you give birth to me looking like this? Right? I think maybe the larger question really is that it's not even just about feminism, is that there's a privilege to having looks that the world has sort of deemed acceptable, right? There's a privilege to that. And it's important for me, for example, to acknowledge it. There are people who I think have been kind of won over because they now realize, okay, it's not because you couldn't find a husband that that you have these fierce views about gender equality. Okay, it's not because you didn't have friends, right? The answer really, I think, for me is that we still need to broaden that, the meaning. And it's a larger question, I think, of sort of challenging privilege, which is to say, if you have the pretty feminist, it's also the pretty heterosexual feminist. It's also important to have the feminist who is not heterosexual, right? And I think that gay women have such an important and central, I think, role in the conversation for many reasons, and we don't have time. But so where is your own? Your own is there. It's shrinking. I'm sorry, I must have contributed to that shrinking. That was not my intent, right? I think it's just a larger thing about how the world functions. And, but also I should say that it was important for me to I like to say that I came out as a person who likes fashion because I've always been that person. But I was hiding it because I felt that nobody would take me seriously. I felt that even my fellow feminists would not take me seriously if I came out wearing my high heels and with my lips painted. And even that for me felt almost almost revolutionary, right? To come out and say, you know what, and all of those things, and I'm still a feminist. It's a complicated conversation, but just to say that I think you're right. I hear you, and I think you're right.
Kwezi, can I also pitch in? I mean, I share your anxiety. And I think that that is also why I was drawn to feminism. But the problem often is that, and I certainly, I'm incredibly untidy. And I like being untidy.
Oh, shut up.
And I think feminism,
You're beautiful. You're not untidy. If I'm being accused of, no, you have to join me because you are gorgeous.
But wait, Chimamanda, you don't know where I'm going. Thank you. I accept that. What I'm saying, I guess, is that there's a certain, part of why feminism is a home for me is that it is able to home all the different bits and messinesses that aren't supposed to go together, right? I don't know that I could be as difficult a person as I am and still like lip gloss in any other movement, right? I would have to be either the person who is this thing, right? So I could be, and of course, the bodies are complicated and readings are complicated. And my anxiety is certainly about some of the faces of feminism in the world. And when I say faces, I don't mean people. I mean the way it starts to function in the world is that but sometimes there's increasingly an anxiety around things that do very conservative work also being called feminist. And I reserve the right as a feminist to say, no, I'm sorry, but I don't think that those are feminist. And people can disagree with me, and they can dislike me, and they can misread me, but I retain the right to insist on questioning the misreading, right? And not hiding it. So I think that it is part of what I don't think I would have been able to be a feminist if it wasn't all of those things that drew you to feminism too, Kwezi. Because I don't want to be in a club that only has one kind of person. And because I, through accident, look a certain way now, and I may have looked a different way at different time, and the entry now seems easily to be because of a certain, I think it's important and it behoves all of us to continue to trouble that acceptance when our own movement gets used against us, right? To render visible certain aspects of ourselves that seem more palatable, even though people know those are not palatable. They know Chimamanda is not palatable, right? But it becomes convenient sometimes to say, oh my God, she's beautiful. And so feminism is safe. Where? Okay, so there's
Hi.
sorry. And
I'm
then
here.
the
I'm
last
here.
one.
I was before you.
Hi.
I was before
Yes,
you.
yes. There's you, and then there's last one in the animal print.
So I'm gonna make it quick. This is just a love
Hello,
shot.
you, my darling.
Yeah, you. Oh, sorry. Quick love fish. So I think I speak for many young women writers. Chimamanda, very quick. So I remember his testimony 11 years ago, 2007. I saw you on BBC Hard Talk. You were the African woman doing what I wanted to do, and I reached out to you. I wrote you a very embarrassing fan mail. You responded, and you sent me your novel, Hafufielosan. I was in Zimbabwe. I had no access to the book. I just had my dreams. And in there, you signed to Novio with the hope that you will keep reading and writing. And I took that very seriously. And a few years later, I got to meet you at Farafina. And I'm sharing this testimony because this year I had my first novel published.
Yeah.
And, it's just through like to see women, you see people like you doing things. Because I have read your interview, I've followed you, I've probably stalked you. But it's to see how others are doing it, to sort of give you the leeway to dream and see how you could do it and to try. So for that, I will forever be grateful for that book, that moment.
One sentence. Okay,
So-
we're out of time,
So
so I'm going to
Novio
let you
is
ask one
a
sentence.
brilliant writer. She came to
Before
the
I let-
workshop in Lagos and just disgraced all of us Nigerians. So we need to warn her. I need the book. Okay.
Okay. One sentence.
Okay, so
Sorry.
my saying is not a question as such, but I'd like to say I came here with a friend who thinks she looks like you. She dragged me here literally, but I'd like to say I really like your topic about feminism because I think a lot of us are stuck in a lot of traditional ways and we're trying to get out of them and we're trying to merge tradition with feminism. How do you get out of that? Because I mean, looking at you, you're a Nigerian woman, ne? Nigeria says a woman is this and you are this. How do you merge that? That's my question.
So merging tradition and feminism.
Just if maybe you could not answer immediately. I already said she could. I know Panacha is going to kill me. Quickly, please, because I already promised you. I know. Just like we're done.
What if we scrap the book signing just so people can hear?
Do you guys want to scrap the book signing? Oh, she needs to leave at 3 o'clock.
Okay, but
Right. Hi.
one sentence. Quickly.
Hi. Good afternoon. I'm asking.
All right.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Adaku. I'm from Nigeria. I'm an energy and gender lawyer. So I wanted to ask about Purple Hibiscus. I read it when I was 18 for the first time. Wonderful book. Then I reread it a few months ago. And the relationship between Kambili and Father Amadi really bothered me. So I wanted to know where you were going with that, because she's clearly underage.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Wait,
Yes.
what's your name? What's your name?
Adaku.
Adako. Sibo Nyibo.
Yes, Onyibo.
Kedu.
Okay, Chimamanda, I'm going to let
Adako
you
has
have the
come
last
here.
word.
Adako has come here to
I had to come
give.
all the way to Johannesburg to meet you. Odimma.
Where do you live? You live here?
I live in Accra.
Oh, my darling one. All right, you have to send an email. There's an email on my website. Send an email. Tell me that we met. We need to talk. But first of all, she has asked a question that I have found troubling. because, you write something and then years later you've kind of evolved and then you go back and read it and you're ever so slightly cringy, ever so slightly. But I have to say that does it trouble me? Yeah, kind of. However, my thing is that Father Amadi was ethical. And that it's important, I think, there's kind of this sort of honesty in storytelling is important. So she's a young girl, she has a crush on a priest. It's not like I'm speaking from experience, maybe I am. And so young people constantly have crushes on older men. And if there's anything to be said about that, I think it would be to say then that the responsibility is on the older person. Right, the responsibility of what to do with that crush is on the older person. And I think Father Amadi does it wonderfully. So clearly he loves her, but he knows that she's a child. What I cannot tell you is that when she turns 18, I don't know where that will go. But what I can tell you is that that until she's an adult, that there's an ethical spine to that thing. Right. Would I write it differently now? Maybe. But in general, when I tell stories, I really want to put the ideological me I really want to suppress. Because otherwise, I think it starts to get in the way of art. Art has to complicate ideologies. Art cannot always align to our ideologies. Otherwise, then there'll be no point. If ideologies are about us wanting to shape the world in a particular way, knowing that it's not that way. Okay. Sadak, you've caused problems for me. Okay. What was tradition and art. Nigeria is a very, very interesting place, right? So, on the one hand, we have women in positions of power, but there's still this need that people have, and I have to say that women have that need, sometimes more than men, that you perform domesticity. Right? So you're the CEO of a bank, but people need you to say publicly in interviews that your husband lets you do something, and that you still cook for your husband, and that people need to hear that. Otherwise, the kind of censoring you get becomes, the kind of censure you get becomes bad. I am a person who feels very sort of connected to my Igbo culture. I grew up in Igbo land. It's part of who I am. But I also reserve the right for myself to question parts of it that seek to reduce my full humanity. And there are parts of it that do. And so those parts I disregard. I am known to have fierce conversations with uncles in my village because I say to them, what you're doing doesn't make sense. It fundamentally doesn't make sense. You cannot say that a woman cannot do this because she's a woman when she's fully capable. So I have those conversations. And there are things I will not do that are considered cultural and traditional. I just will not do them. Right, and like I said earlier, the thing I think to being a woman in the world who wants to live on her own terms is that you have to accept that there are consequences, and you have to be willing to absorb them. Right? It's going to be that some people will say that you're terrible, you're nasty, they hate you, you're annoying. It comes with the territory, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chimamanda.
Thank you.
It has been absolutely.
Sister Wale.